Thank you. Now call Stewart Stevenson to wind up the debate. You have until just before 5, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think the debate perfectly illustrates the old saying that something starts off as a heresy, it becomes an argument, and eventually it becomes an orthodoxy. I suspect we're actually in a position where it's a heterodoxy. In other words, we all agree but have different opinions about certain aspects of it. But certainly in Scotland, the agreement that we struck across the political divide took a lot of hard work on everybody's part to do it in 2009, was an excellent foundation for our future action. Elaine Murray, in her concluding remarks, raised the issue of a second commitment period under Kyoto, and indeed others, I think Aileen McLeod was one, and there were others, made a mention of that. I think we want to be careful in one particular respect. A second commitment period for the existing treaty is clearly second best to having an up-to-date treaty that is legally binding across the world and reflects today's needs. Certainly it's something that should be kept in the locker, but the UK Government is quite clear that the focus has to be on negotiating a new treaty suitable for a new era where we understand more about the issues. So it is very much a fallback, and we agree with that. Elaine Murray mentioned carbofluorocarbons, etc. It is like peat outside the counting system. And I think that one of the things we certainly would wish to see is the accounting system taking more account of things that have a real impact, positively and negatively, on greenhouse gas emissions, and hence the issue of climate change. Let's remind ourselves of something I've said many occasions, including in 2008, 2009, that the targets are long-term for us, although the impacts are immediate and with us now. The 2050 target of 80% reduction, one we share with the UK Government, I think it's fair to say, according to the Registrar General's report, I think a month ago, he predicts I have a 16.7-year life expectancy in Scotland, which I hope he's wrong. I will be 104 years old in 2050 if I'm so spared. I would rather like to see what's actually happening. Elaine Murray asked me a very specific question about whether the fossil fuel levy can be used to restore peatlands. I don't know the answer to that. I'll ensure that she gets an answer, because there are technical issues about what it may be spent on. I, too, would like to see some of that there. And I think we're in agreement on the value that there is from small-scale biomass in local communities. Let me thank Elaine Murray, as I've had from others, notably Malcolm Chisholm, the good wishes that I take with me to Durban. And let me say to Alec Johnson that today the temperature in Durban is 19 and it's raining heavily. But of course, as I will be inside throughout the entire visit, I will never see any of the place whatsoever. Alec Johnson also talked, as many Conservatives increasingly are, about wind. And of course, it's worth reminding ourselves that we have a diverse range of renewable energies. We have, thanks to the work very largely led by Tom Johnson, the famous and very effective Labour Scottish Secretary, a significant hydro industry that's been with us for a long time. We are moving towards tidal energy, which is a much more predictable and reliable source of energy. It has a diurnal cycle, which is not a large cycle, and it has an annual cycle as well, but it is predictable. A pragmatic, sustainable approach is needed, says Alec Johnson. Moving to tidal delivers on that. And speaking of peatland, Rob Gibson did, as he would normally be expected to, make reference to peatland. We do need to measure and account for our land use change and forests, and we do hope to see progress on that. Claudia Beamish, I very much welcome to this debate. I absolutely recognise in her previous life before coming here, she was engaged in this issue. She has an insight and a range of experience that is well worth listening to. She made a point about a report on energy efficiency with the Scottish Government comes well down the park. If I'm thinking of the correct report, it is one that is essentially related to have we put in smart meters and have we got them our buildings accredited. We're going to the accreditation standard, but we haven't gone for accreditation. And we are taking the actions because of our policy that smart meters might force you to do. So I think we're doing rather better than perhaps that report suggested. We share Claudia Beamish's disappointment about the sudden change of financial support for solar panels, this following upon the disastrous change in the regime for oil in industries where long-term certainty is absolutely required. I don't believe we've had a response yet from the UK government after Fergus Ewing's writing to them. Woodland Allotment in Peebles, I'm delighted to say I visited. An excellent initiative, and indeed the Climate Challenge Fund has supported 1,000 allotments so far. Don't be too restrictive is what I wrote down as, in essence, what Claudia Beamish said, and I don't think we are being so. The claims of the projects by the project submitters on the Climate Challenge Fund at one point was 700,000 tonnes. It's now rising because we're continuing with the fund. And I did previously say to committee a bit over a year ago, not every project will succeed because we're not drawing the regulations so tight that we're excluding innovation, which may or may not succeed. And it's very important to recognise that that is the case. Graham Day gave us some fairly alarming figures from an IPCC report on violent storms going up, CO2 going up, and so on and so forth. And indeed, that is, of course, absolutely true. We'll continue to exercise leadership. Annabel Ewing, of course, made an important contribution, referred to the Cymru Development Trust, who, if I recall correctly, have 3 projects supported by the Climate Challenge Fund. And I found myself visiting there, including their allotments, some 18 months ago. Or thereabouts. Jenny Mara, again, I welcome her to this debate. I think she should perhaps remember on transport, for example, that we continue to make substantial investments in the rail network, some £1 billion in relation to Egypt, for example. And on the subject of eco-driving, essentially, that can be funded by the companies and drivers themselves. I've recently heard of an example where the entire cost of an eco-driving course for a team of white van men was recovered in 6 weeks in reduced fuel consumption. And I think that's something that we can see quite substantially around the place. Freight Facilities Grant was made reference by Malcolm Chisholm. Alas, we never got enough good projects. I have to say, I constantly banged the drum in my previous ministerial position. Patrick Harvey seemed to talk down our 27.6% achievement en route to 42% by 2020. I think that's an excellent achievement. Various people have said it's important we now lock in that achievement, and of course we will be seeking to do that. I don't now have time, I'm sorry. But, Presiding Officer, it is important that we see the economic value of the activity we're doing. When we create jobs, we create wider commitment to the agenda. We have an expectation that jobs in the low-carbon economy will rise from 70,000 to 130,000 by 2020, some 5% of the workforce in total. I think, however, let me, in conclusion, and turn to a couple of things Sarah Boyack made reference to. She said, she made reference to carbon capture, and of course, I'm afraid we cannot forget or forgive that the Labour Party in government at Westminster failed the test of government when they sabotaged the Peterhead carbon capture system. So it ill behoves them to speak on that subject. And frankly, in her contribution today, which she says she resists the temptation to provide a list of budget amendments to address some of the issues she wants to undertake, she fails the challenge of opposition. Presiding Officer, I hope we have a good conference in Durban. I thank everyone who has contributed to this debate.